This is our first water talk of 2024. We started these last year, at least started calling them water talks last year. And so we have a lot of those recorded on YouTube. They're also placed on our website, and encourage you to go take a look at those. And we're really excited about today's topic with Diane Weatherby presenting, talking about how to partner with your HOA. We know HOAs get a lot of heat for being a high water user, for maybe being more, I guess, demanding is a good word to say, of citizens. And so there are some laws in place that allow you to put native plants and things like that in your landscape, but there is a little uncertainty that Diane can help us navigate today, particularly with just still maintaining the neighborhood aesthetic of that. So she's going to talk about how best ways to partner with your HOA, not just for your landscape, but also for the neighborhood as a whole. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Diane. She's a Texas Master Naturalist, as well as a member of the Native Prairies Association of Texas and the Native Plant Society of Texas. She's vice chairman of the board of the Flower Mound Foundation, which are the caretakers of the town's namesake prairie, which I live pretty close to, so it's a cool spot to go to. She is a certified citizen forester and is a board member of the Cross Timbers Urban Forestry Council. After a career in corporate communications and product marketing, she turned to her first passion, the natural world. She was an interpretive naturalist and environmental educator at the Lake Louisville Environmental Learning Area for 12 years and has been working toward a PhD in forestry at Stephen F. Austin State University for what seems like forever, only lacking her dissertation, which that sounds incredible. We'll have to talk more about that sometime. In her spare time, which doesn't seem like you have much of, she serves as vice president of Lantana's Denton County Freshwater Supply District 7 Board of Directors and is a member of Lantana HOA's Architectural Review Committee. So with that, Diane, I will hand it off to you. Oh, and if you do have questions at any point during the presentation, go ahead and put them in the chat box, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll go back and get to those. So with that, Diane, feel free to take it away.
All right, great. Welcome, everybody. This is a topic I'm passionate about, and I think it's really important right now. I got interested in this, in the whole topic of HOAs and what they could or couldn't say about my native landscape when I moved into Lantana, which is known to have a strong HOA. I moved 12 years ago, 9 years ago to yesterday. So the first thing I did was look at the documents, the HOA documents, to make sure I could live with them. And one thing I will say about Lantana is that I was encouraged by the number of native plants on their recommended plant list. I want to say all of the pictures in this presentation, or nearly all of them, are pictures that I took right here in our neighborhood. So either in my yard, or in the case of the background of this slide, it's actually the native plant garden right outside of our event center. So I'll talk more about that later. So let's talk. Okay, it's not going forward. Oh, great. Interesting. Huh. It's not allowing me to, there we go. Boy, that was slow. So let's talk native landscaping. Just what are native plants? So a native plant is just a plant that's occurred naturally in a particular place without human introduction. So it's not something that was brought in from Europe or Asia. It's a plant that has always grown there long before humans started cultivating plants. Our native pollinators and other insects and wildlife have evolved with our native plants. So they recognize that plant as providing food, shelter, the nesting material they need, and also nesting sites. Our native plants are adapted to our, and I put sometimes challenging, but I believe it's always challenging, Texas environments, mostly by developing deep root systems. So that allows the plants to find water deep underground. Some of the roots of some of the plants go 10 to 20 feet deep, depending on what you're planting. It also improves, those native plants improve soil infiltration. As the water falls from the sky, like in one of our gully washers, there's less runoff because the water infiltrates along those deep roots. Something we don't think about is those deep roots also help increase carbon sequestration, because as the plants pull in the carbon, it deposits it deep underground. So it's kind of a carbon sink, if you will. And not least, they improve the soil quality because it adds organic matter deep into the ground as well, not just at the surface of the ground. So when I talk about native landscapes in HOA, surely there are some benefits, and there definitely are, and they benefit all of us, starting with increased biodiversity. So depending on the number and variety of plants that you plant, when a disease or a pest attacks one plant, it's not going to wipe out everybody's landscape. A good example of this is rose rosette. I mean, I lost 20 roses in a previous landscape, and foolishly I planted them again when we moved into this house, and I lost 10 of them here. So I won't be planting roses anytime soon. But that's a great example of what can happen if you plant too much of one kind of plant. Also, by planting a variety of native plants, you're offering up a buffet. Nobody wants to eat the same thing every day, and not everybody likes to eat the same thing. Same applies to our native insects and other critters. And native plants offer a buffet to meet the needs of a variety of them. Reduced water usage is a huge benefit to all of us. These plants are adapted to our periods of flood and drought. And, we'll have a drought for years. We've actually been in a drought for 2 years now. And the only thing that seems to break a drought in North Texas is a flood. So we can pretty much guarantee we'll have flooding rains coming up somewhere in the not too distant future. The interesting thing is more native plants are killed by overwatering than by underwatering. If in a drought period, the plants may go dormant, they may look sick, they may be stunted, but they're probably going to survive because those roots are pretty deep. But in the first time it rains, they'll come roaring back. But people will water and water and water their plants, and then they'll say, well, my plant is all brown, it must need more water. Well, it's brown because it's dying, because you're overwatering. One of the best friends that you can have if you have a native landscape or any landscape is one of those soil moisture meters. They're really cheap. You can get them for under $10, and go 6 inches down and see how much water is in that landscape that looks really dry on the surface, and you might be surprised. Native landscapes reduce the need for fertilizers and pesticides, especially chemical fertilizers and pesticides. The native plants that we have evolved with the insects in that region, so they may have some foes, but there are usually friendly insects that go along with it to kill those the foes. An example of that are aphids and the ladybugs. If you spray a chemical pesticide on your plants, you're not only killing the foe, the aphid, but you're also killing the ladybugs. So it's something to think about as you're spraying. If you leave things alone, eventually your landscape will reach a balance and you lose the plants that you think you might. Also, the native plants obviously are adapted to that area's soil conditions. Our soil conditions here, we have a thin layer of sand over some really awful red clay. And I have planted native plants in gardens where I've chipped away at the soil just to be able to dig into it and planted plants, and they thrived. So it surprised me, but it worked. Also, you have lower maintenance costs with a native landscape. Obviously you're going to save on water bills because plants just don't need as much water, and it also reduces your maintenance requirements for your yard, and you'll save money on fertilizers and pesticides as well, because those things are not cheap. There's other advantages too, like conserving our water resources during a drought period. As I said, we've been in a drought. Upper Trinity has had watering restrictions in place for 2 years. A lot of people don't know that, but we're restricted to watering twice a week, and this is native plantings are one way to help preserve that water. It also, because of the infiltration, it helps prevent the pollution of surface and groundwater. When we have the gully washers, they're not as likely to run off. They're more likely to trickle in, and it won't pollute our surface water. Not one of the greatest advantages, and the reason I plant them is because it attracts all those beautiful butterflies and hummingbirds and other wildlife to our yards, including a lot of native bees and cool flies and things like that we don't usually see. There's an increased aesthetic value in curb appeal, and that sounds a little counterintuitive when so many HOAs are against native plants because they feel like they bring down a neighborhood. But what I found is that if you have a well-maintained native landscape, and we'll talk more about that in a bit, that people actually really like it. In fact, I've got neighbors that come, one in particular will bring her grandkids by my house every year to take pictures in front of one of my landscape beds because they're so pretty especially in the spring. And then, of course, there's the pride in just knowing that you're doing something significant to protect and beautify our community. So with all those benefits, why do HOA neighborhoods say no to landscapes, to native landscapes? Well, let's first talk about HOAs. They're here to stay. It's estimated that over a quarter of the population in the US lives in an HOA neighborhood. And I think, I don't have statistics on it, but I believe that in many parts of Texas, that number may actually be higher. Increasingly, cities are requiring that new developments be governed by an HOA, mostly because it solves some of their code enforcement headaches. And I think for instance, in Flower Mound, our neighboring city here, they require every new development to have an HOA. HOAs exist to protect the homeowner's interest in investment. If they didn't, we wouldn't put up with an HOA, right? But it's been shown that property values in HOA neighborhoods are about 5 to 6% more than in non-HOA neighborhoods, which is about $25,000 on a $500,000 house. And with housing prices going up, that is even more. Now, that may not sound very attractive when you're paying your property taxes, but when you're going to sell your house, that's a pretty significant number. So why do HOAs resist encouraging native landscapes if there's lots of benefits? Well, this is the biggest reason of all. They favor uniformity. They want to see everyone with their mowed, green, non-native turf grasses, the Bermuda or the St. Augustine. They want to see similar shrubs in front of all houses, and they all need to be trimmed into neat little rectangles or balls. And the lists of approved plants often are made up of mainly non-natives. And the reason for that is that usually the plants that that whoever's writing up the list knows. They know the non-natives because that's what the big box stores sell. Traditionalists on the board think native landscapes are weedy or unkempt. I mean, that's what the picture that they have in their mind. It may or may not be true, but that's what they think. Basically, there's just a general lack of knowledge on HOA boards about native plants and landscaping, and not just native plants. Most HOA boards are made up of people who have no understanding of landscaping at all, other than wanting to see everything uniform. And there's a huge resistance to change because change could bring something bad they're afraid of. So they're very resistant to that change. So looking at what are some typical acceptable suburban landscapes? Well, here's 3 houses of very acceptable landscapes. These 3 houses all happen to be neighbors of mine. In fact, the one in the middle is the neighbor across the street. These are all on my street, in fact. You can see the nice little shrubs, all neatly pruned. We have front landscape maintenance in Lantana, and that's how our landscaper trims everything. Needless to say, they don't trim our landscape because they have pulled up too many things that they thought were weeds that were actually plants. But what about this one? What about this landscape? It looks more like what people think of as xeriscaping. And this actually also happens to be on my street. He's just down a couple of doors down from me. He has more non-natives in this landscape, at least non-native to this area of North Texas. But his plants are all low water usage plants. And during the growing season, he throws in some natives, like he's got lantana that's blooming all the time, and other native flowers that kind of soften the look of the desert look of that landscape. It's really attractive, but I had to fight with people on our ARC, our Architectural Review Committee, to allow this landscape, or to think that this landscape was beautiful. Because it really is. It's just gorgeous. So how do we overcome those challenges? Well, one of the first things that I would do is change the terminology. We have to be careful of the words that we use. To most people, xeriscaping means cactus and gravel, kind of like this picture shows, which usually isn't acceptable to most HOAs. In most parts of Texas. That might be a New Mexico landscape, probably is. This obviously doesn't come from my neighborhood. You can see there's an extensive use of gravel. There's a lot of open space without plants. There's a few cactus here and there. So xeriscaping just has a negative connotation because this is what people think of as xeriscaping. Even the term wildscaping, I think, is a term we probably need to do away with when we're trying to change mindsets. Wildscaping to most people implies an unkempt, weedy patch, something gone wild, not groomed, not suitable for a suburban neighborhood. So what are some terms we should be using? Well, things like native landscape, native plantings, pollinator plants, bird-friendly plants, those all sound a lot more intentional and less disheveled. They sound like things that you want to do. Everybody wants to protect the environment and bring in pollinators and birds. Water-wise plants, that's a great term because it sounds like a solution to the problem that we have with an increasingly short supply of water resources. Native Plant Society of Texas has a definition of wildscape, and I would strongly encourage that to be changed to a native landscape rather than a wildscape. It's a way of designing your home's landscape to attract and benefit birds and pollinators by providing the required food, water, and shelter. That's a perfect definition. It's one that you should bookmark to take to your HOA if they start not wanting your native landscape. One of the most important things that anybody can do if they want more wildscapes, more native landscapes in their neighborhoods, are to provide education, because that's what it's all about. It's most resistance to native landscape comes from a lack of education on what they are. So you can provide speakers to your HOA groups. NIPSOT, Native Plant Society, Master Gardeners, Master Naturalists, the regional water districts, all of them have speakers that are available to come for free to talk to HOA groups. These groups will help educate your residents on beauty of native plants, on good plant choices for your area, and those plant choices vary greatly within the state of Texas. What grows in North Texas may not grow in South Texas or in Corpus along the coast, and things that grow very well there may not grow at all here in North Texas. So you have to be careful on your plant choices. They'll talk about the benefits of native plants. You can have talks on landscape principles and how to maintain those landscapes. Also, all of those groups have handouts that you can get for free on the websites. And if you make those handouts available to residents of your neighborhood, that will help. Any piece of education that you can give them is helpful. And a lot of those handouts are very attractive. They're not just gray reading materials. They're quick reads that give good points. The next point, social media. Use social media for good, not evil. You can take pictures of your own landscape, take pictures of your neighborhood. If you have a neighborhood butterfly garden, if you have neighbors that have beautiful native landscapes, take pictures in different seasons and post them to your neighborhood social media groups. We all have some sort of a neighborhood group or community group or next door. And if you post those pictures, people will start to see the beauty of these landscapes. I like to take a lot of pictures with insects or hummingbirds going to native plants, things like that, and post those as well. And also, you can collaborate with landscape professionals. Increasingly, our landscape professionals are starting to use native plants. Some of them are really educating themselves on the use of native plants in landscaping and how to design gorgeous landscapes using native plants. So collaborate with them. If you have a landscaper, help educate them, give them some resources to learn more. And then recommend those landscapers whenever possible. In those community groups, people are always asking, what landscaper should we use? Well, if you provide them with landscapers who will use more native plants, you'll end up with more native plants. Also, all the area water utilities are running campaigns. They're sending out materials, and they're holding online and in-person programs like this one. Just like Upper Trinity has been great at providing a lot of those, but all the other regional water districts and local city-owned water utilities are running campaigns as well. So and these campaigns usually encourage the use of native water-wise plants, and water-wise is key here. They encourage the reduced use of pesticides and herbicides, and provide some alternatives for those to help maintain the status quo in your garden. They also talk a lot about the proper irrigation techniques and the amounts. You don't need as much. You don't have to water every other day, usually 4 hours at a time. And they also talk about maintenance of irrigation systems, which I think a lot of those topics are already available on Upper Trinity's website or their YouTube channel, because we've had those programs in the past. And then area libraries are a great source. I know Master Gardeners, Master Naturalists all hold programs at the library for free that talk about native landscaping. And if you spread the word to your neighborhood that these are available, share the event posts from Facebook saying, invite neighbors to go with you to these programs. Tap into these resources because every one I've listed there is free. And just like the cedar waxwing on my possum haw holly, nibble away at the problem. Make it easy for non-gardeners to get started. I mean, a lot of us are gardeners and we know plants, or we know how to get started, or we're not afraid to get started, but that's not true of most people. First of all, it's not an all or nothing thing. Encourage even a small change, a single plant here or there. These native plants tend to propagate themselves rather prolifically sometimes. And so dig up some of those plants, pot them up, and share the wealth with your neighbors. So anyone that plants, any neighbor that plants one of your pass-alongs adds another native plant to your neighborhood. There's a company here in North Texas, Rooted In, and I'm using them because they actually started this when Ag Life Extension had something called Water University, which they've since done away with. But the people who own Rooted In started this as part of that program. These go and grow boxes. It's a brilliant idea. It's just, it's pure genius because it also includes a landscape plan. So what it is just a box of 24 plants. They're natives and nativars, so cultivars of native plants. And but most importantly, they come along with a landscape plan for either a triangular bed, a circular bed, or an oblong bed. And for most people, the thought of designing a landscape is just beyond them. I know I have difficulty with that as well, even though I've taken landscape classes. So they provide basically a paint by numbers landscape plan. You get the plants, you plop them in the way they tell you to do, and in a couple of years you have a beautiful, lush native landscape. And I would love to see more of our nurseries use this plan. Rooted In is on a pretty big scale now. They even send those boxes to the Hill Country, to I think San Antonio and Austin. They have drop-off places, but you could do that on a smaller scale, some of these smaller nurseries, and that would just really go a long way to helping people learn and know how to plant some of these native landscapings. And when somebody asks you where to buy some plants, send them to nurseries that are more apt to carry natives. So you can start with NIPSOT's list of NICE nurseries, and NICE stands for Natives Improve and Conserve Environment. Every chapter has a list of NICE nurseries in that particular area, and those nurseries will carry natives that are adapted to that particular area of Texas. Work the system from the inside. This is the approach I took. Get appointed to the Architectural Review Board. I did that. I kept spouting off, and one of the HOA board members came to me and said, okay, we're starting a resident run ARC. We'd like you to be on it. So I had to put my money where my mouth was. And it makes a difference. Get elected to the HOA board itself, because appeals to the ARC end up eventually at the HOA board. And if you're working from the inside, you can help influence that. Work with the HOA to plant native gardens in the common areas. All HOAs have common areas. That's one of the things that they spend money on maintaining. And if you work with them, you're more likely to get some native plant gardens going. And in fact, in Lantana, we built a new event center, and when it was under construction, I looked at the landscape plan and I said, wow, here's this great big bed right next to the event center. Can I have that to plant a native garden? Only I said Monarch Way Station, which made it acceptable. So they not only did they give me the plot of land to plant the garden, but I got a grant to plant it as well, which was even better. And you can also write new guidelines yourself to encourage the use of native plants. You know, create new suggested plant lists that include more natives and fewer non-natives, and definitely take off the invasives. Present that to the board rather than having them try to create something from scratch, because remember, these people do not know plants for the most part. And the easier you make it for them to adopt something new, the more likely it is to get adopted. Create a native landscape that looks intentional. So I say lead by example. What you do will have impact on the rest of the community and the ability to continue with native landscapes. So just make sure it looks intentional. The NIPSOT's Native Landscape Certification Program classes can really help with that. It's an awesome program. You take the first class is required for all future classes. I think there's 4 in the series plus one outside of the series called Landscaping for Birds, my personal favorite. But those are really helpful, and you can encourage landscapers, landscape professionals to take those classes as well. Put a neat border around your plantings. I can't over confirm how important that is. If a bed has a neat border around it, it is way more likely to get accepted. Keep the true weeds at bay. You know, what's a weed? Anything that's growing where you don't want it. And so if you have things that are overgrowing, and they might even be native plants, but if it's starting to overgrow your bed, or it's looking not very tidy, get rid of those weeds. Put up a sign, and you're going to hear me talk about signs over and over again, but put up a sign explaining your native landscaping. There's several available. National Wildlife Federation has their certified wildlife habitat. It's pretty easy to obtain. Monarch Way Station signs are from Monarch Watch. All you need to do is make sure you're meeting the criteria of each of these programs. And also there are signs available online everywhere. Go to Etsy, go to Amazon. There's some really cute, really attractive signs that you can purchase online that explain what your native garden is and why you're growing it. And then NIPSOT just introduced a new sign. I just ordered mine last week. It's a really nice sign. And so again, it just explains this: I'm growing a native garden, and this is the benefits of that garden. And also, you know what? You need to follow the requirements. Whether you agree with them or not, you do need to follow the requirements. So if your HOA requires you to get approval for new landscape plans, get the approval. But if you're running it through the approval process, make it easy for them to approve it. Do a hand-drawn plan. I drew mine out on graph paper, but when you draw it, show the full size of the plant. Don't just put a dot, like I'm going to plant purple coneflowers here. I'm going to plant blue mistflower here, and with little dots. Show the full size of the plants, the size that they'll be after 3 years of growing, so that they can see that bed will be full and not just little tiny individual plants. Use colored pencils. That's great. If you're planting Zexmenia, use a yellow pencil to show that circle. If you're planting Gulf Muley, use a pink pencil. You know, if you have an evergreen shrub of some sort, use a green pencil. Just anything you can do to help them visualize how that bed might look in the end. And then include pictures of the plants you intend to use. On my committee, I am always having to bring up pictures on my phone to show them, yes, this plant will work here in this spot, and it will fill in the spot. And if the person applying for approval would just have included those pictures, it would have made the approval go through much more quickly. Make your yard a demonstration garden. There is no better advertisement for the use of native plants in gardens than to have your own demo garden right there in your yard. plant with a purpose. You know, again, make it purposeful, make it intentional. Use mostly native plants. Again, the picture here is of actually the same person's yard as the previous picture. And she has non-natives in her plantings, but they're just kind of scattered few and far between. It's almost all natives. Use a variety of plants to have color all year round. Try to find plants that are, you know, some that are evergreen, some that will bloom in the winter. And you know what, in the wintertime, that may be your best chance to put some of the non-natives, the things that survive up north that don't survive down here, just for a little bit of color, and so it doesn't look quite as bleak in the winter. Because despite the fact that North Texas has winter and plants die in the winter, HOAs don't seem to like that very much. So it's just the way it is. Again, make it look intentional. Use borders, use professional looking borders. Cut back aggressive plants, things that are overgrowing your beds. It doesn't have to look wild and out of control. It can look, now this landscape in this picture, it's very full, but it doesn't look out of control. It looks like it's supposed to look. And also, when you're planning your landscape, use wildlife habitat principles. Have different heights of plants. Don't make them all one height. Make sure you use differing heights. Make sure you provide food for the native critters that you're looking for. You know, you should have nectar plants, but you should also have plants that will be eaten. You know, those butterflies don't exist without caterpillars. And so plants that the caterpillars will eat, and every butterfly has its own specific host plant, like Gulf fritillaries and passion vine. Plant enough of those so that when the caterpillars eat it, it doesn't bother you, you know, that you plant some for them, plant some for you is the way I'd put it. Leave seed heads on if you can. I've got cowpen daisies right now in a bed in my backyard that the smaller birds are landing on right now and eating seeds out of those seed heads. So I'll leave those up for probably another week or two, and then it's time to cut back. If you can include a source of water, like a cute bird bath or something like that, the birds will love you, and it will really draw in birds, especially in the wintertime if you can keep water in it without freezing. Just most importantly, keep your curb appeal high. Just maintain a kept look. So when somebody is driving by or walking by, they look at that and they go, wow, that is really gorgeous. If you are cited by the HOA, don't ignore it. Don't just throw out the letter and ignore it. Go to the ARC and say, okay, what do I need to do? Compromise where it's reasonable. You know, figure out what will be accepted and fix it. Be respectful. If you go in fixing for a fight, you know, you're going to get a fight. But if you go in respectfully and go through the appeal process as they ask, you are more likely to get your way. And what about the appeal process? Well, during the appeal process, advocate for native plants and educate the board. It's all about education. As I said before, the board usually doesn't understand what you're trying to do. And so if you educate them, they're more likely to find out that what you're doing really is intentional. Clarify for them what are weeds and what the plants are and what their benefits are, and emphasize that native plants suppress those weeds. So if you have a nice full native plant bed, you're less likely to have weeds. Play up any credibility that you have. If you've gone through the NLCP program from NIPSOD, or if you have a certified landscape, you know, play that up. Look, these national organizations or local organizations have recognized the benefits of my landscape. And when you're arguing, use recognized resources, credible resources to show that your plants are native. Things like NIPSOD's lists, which every chapter has on their website, as does the state. Go to the Wildflower Center, you know, the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center. They only list native plants there. So use that. Use Texan by Nature. You know, use any of those recognized resources that you can find. And if all else fails, cite the law. Texas Senate Bill 198 was passed in 2013, and it actually prevents HOAs from prohibiting the use of drought-resistant landscaping or water-conserving turf, which means, yes, you can have buffalo grass lawns because that is a water-saving turf. Of course, you can only have those if you have a lot of sun, but you can't prohibit the use of drought-resistant landscaping. However, HOAs can still require preliminary approval of any plans. Control is limited and it has to be reasonable. So they can't just withhold approval if it's unreasonable. They have to have a good reason. And like I said, it has to be reasonable. However, they can require preliminary approval. So, you know, go in, if you're changing your landscaping and your HOA wants preliminary approval, do it. They can still require a certain amount of turf grass. In Lantana, that's 50% of your front has to be turf, which I am trying to get changed. Hopefully we can reduce that to some extent. But they can also require that beds be clearly defined and neatly edged. Like I said, that makes your garden look intentional. And also they can dictate certain types of multi-materials. In our case, it's a great restriction. I mean, we say you can't use bright white rock. I think that's about the only thing. As long as it looks natural, it's accepted. So with all of that, are there success stories? Well, of course there are. The city of Louisville has this great program. It's new. It just has started about a year ago, called Roots for Wings. It was the brainchild of Louisville's mayor, TJ Gilmore. And in fact, he is presenting at the state symposium for NIPSOT next, let's see, I think it's March 2nd. Because of this program and other initiatives that Louisville has done. The members of NIPSOT and our chapter, the Elm Fork chapter of Master Naturalists, wrote all the materials for this program. What it does is it requires a homeowner to attend a mandatory workshop and fill out an application. And in that application, they have to include their plant list and photos of the space that they're intending to plant. And then they have to have it inspected. And the inspection is actually done by volunteers from NIPSOT and the Master Naturalists. And they'll go out and they'll also offer advice. They'll help with the plant choices, things like that. So once it meets all the criteria, the homeowners get a yard sign. So the yard sign, again, with the yard sign, right? The sign shows that they're part of that program. And then they have to recertify every 3 years. And that's just a way of making sure that they're continuing with the upkeep of their native landscape. So the city is also looking at their weed ordinances. They'll revise them to incorporate the pollinator program. Code enforcement has not quite caught up to this program yet, but when they do cite a Roots for Wings yard for whatever reason, it's usually quickly overturned. So it's a great program. Hats off to Louisville. City of Denton is participating in the National Wildlife Federation's Community Wildlife Habitat Certification, which includes a yard sign, again with the signs, to show that you're a Denton wildlife steward. Denton's also working towards a Bird City, Texas certification. It is a member of Bee City USA and Monarch City USA. And they're planting open spaces and rights of way with native plantings. Now, when they have those spaces that need to be planted, instead of just throwing in Bermuda grass, which frankly is easier for them because all they have to do is mow it, right? They're planting it with native plantings. And other cities in the area are doing it as well. I know Louisville definitely does that. Flower Mound has really started doing a lot more of that, planting their rights of way and some of their open spaces with native plantings. So, keep encouraging your cities to do that as well. In the Hill Country, the Texas Master Naturalists and NIPSOT teamed together to create the Pollinator Garden Assistance and Recognition Program. And they help residents plan native gardens, and they include a site visit, education again. They discuss with the homeowner what would be the best thing to plant in that area, give them a lot of free advice. And then once they plant that, the homeowner gets a certificate of recognition, and they get a sign, again with the signs. So this one was a bit of a battle in Flower Mound, right next door to me here, in the Wellington HOA. We had a couple who planted native plants in their hell strip, the area between the sidewalk and the road. And they had completed the Master Gardener program. They also participated in the year-long Denton County water conservation study because they planted so many natives within their yard. But they got cited by the HOA. But they didn't get cited because of their native plants. They got cited because they didn't get prior approval for it. The Rosencrantzes turned around and they cited the law, the one that I had mentioned earlier, and they half won. Okay, they did comply with the HOA to a point. So I took this picture last fall when everything was still lush and green. You can see the hell strip is now mowed Bermuda grass. That's where they gave in. But the rest of their yard they've maintained the minimum amount of turf grass, and the rest are all native plantings. And I'll tell you, in the summer when it's all blooming, wow, it's a showstopper. It looks awesome. So you can do it, even in an HOA. So what's next? Well, most of all, advocate for native plants. Educate, 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 but be polite about it. Okay, you don't win hearts and minds by being combative. Be polite. Sell the benefits of native plants that we've gone over. And encourage people, your neighbors, to start somewhere, even with just one plant. Like I said, give them your pass-along plants. And that's one more plant in your neighborhood. Plant a community native garden and look for grants. You'd be surprised that all those open spaces, a lot of communities would love somebody to take them over. What I have found, however, in that butterfly garden that I planted, I have to keep our landscaper out, the HOA's landscaper. They can't, because they don't know the difference between a perennial that's popping up from seed or a weed. So just because they have not been educated. So we kind of keep them away and we maintain it ourselves, but get a group of residents to maintain. And by doing that, you're teaching those residents also about native plants and encouraging them to plant more. Manage your natural landscapes so they don't look unkept. The neater they look, the more like a beautiful cottage garden rather than a weedy field, the more likely they are to be accepted. And then use weeks like Texas Native Plant Week, or even Arbor Day, or some of the other, Earth Day. Plan activities and education during those times. Call on those people who call on the resources that I gave you earlier. And speaking of resources, here are some that you can find online. Take a screenshot of that where this is being recorded, so you can go back and come back to this later if you don't get a chance to get a screenshot of it. But there's a National Wildlife Federation has a guide to passing wildlife-friendly property maintenance ordinances. And that is a great guide to use with your HOA if you're trying to help them rewrite their docs to enable more native landscaping. There's NIPSOT has a wonderful publication called Dealing with Your Homeowners Association. I encourage everybody to download that and use that, refer to that. You can take a look at Louisville's Roots for Wings program and also the Hill Country Pollinator Garden Assistance program online to get an idea of something that you might do in your own community. Start up. You know, every program starts with a single person. So if you can take something like that on, do so. And then there's the link to that Texas Senate Bill 198 from 2013. So use that when you need to. I hate pulling out that first, but it's a good law. So so that's it. I just want to show this last picture is that's the Monarch Way Station, or our butterfly garden, our native landscape in Lantana. The one on the left shows the day that we planted it. It's missing all the little, I actually put in spoons to mark where some of the plants were because they were so little. But you can see the HOA even put down drip irrigation for me, which was fantastic. But that's where it started. The one on the right is where it was 3 years later. So that old adage of it sleeps, it creeps, it leaps really played out in our Monarch Way Station. We get a lot of comments on that landscaping.